everyone. It's been a little while since I last moto vlogged, but I've got this Sinnis bomber as a test bike for a few weeks now, and it's going back this week, so I thought it'd be good to get out, make a little video on it and tell you what it's all about. This is the second bike I've had from Sinnis. I had the Terrain as well, which is like their 125 adventure bike a few months ago. Really enjoyed it, and I have a great time on these little 125s because I did direct access when I got my bike license, so straight up to a big bike, and I feel like I missed out on that nostalgic feeling towards small capacity, lightweight, cheap bikes that everyone seems to have, that learnt when they were a teenager and worked their way up to bigger bike. So it's nice for me to get to ride little bikes like this, and they're perfect for around town as well. I mean, fundamentally the appeal for me is that in London, on my street twin, not exactly a performance bike, in second gear at a modest level of revs, you're already doing 30 miles an hour, whereas on this bike, if you're riding it in a relaxed, sort of gentle kind of way, you're up to like third, fourth gear by the time you're doing 30. So you do get to feel like you're using more of the bike, and actually you can pretty much get the throttle wide open and hold on to the revs a bit, and you're not going to be doing speeds that are like lose your license territory. Part of that is actually like the short gearing, which I think they've had to do because the 125 motor that's based on a Suzuki GS single cylinder air cooled, it is fuel injection, but it puts out 11.5 horsepower, which isn't a great deal, so they've kept it snappy feeling, I think. Yeah, it feels pretty lively away from the lights. Combined with the fact that it's at like 125 kilograms, yeah, perhaps that's why you do feel like you are riding it quite hard. As a result of that short gearing, see what I mean? Like that was 30 and that was quite, wide open throttle, holding on to second. Yeah, as a result of that short gearing, top speed isn't necessarily exhilarating. About 50, 55 it feels comfortable. 60 it's starting to rev quite a lot. I think 65 is about the most you'll get out of it with a good tailwind and downhill. But come on, if you're buying this bike for motorway riding, it's you that's at fault, like you've bought the wrong bike rather than Sinnis. That's not what it's built for. It's a little bit retro styled, it's a bit posy, it's a town bike essentially, and it sips fuel, so for commuting duties and also the size of it as well for filtering makes it pretty good actually. That said, when you do hold on to the gears, it can rev up a bit. You can definitely feel a bit more power at the top end as you do rev it. There's no rev counter on this bike, so I can't tell you exactly where I am in the rev range there, but if you get a bit of open road, you can hang on to the gears, and I mean, I'm in fourth now, but down to second, and if you need to do a cheeky little overtake, there's enough there if you bang down a couple of gears. It takes a while, you have to plan ahead a bit, but it's enough. The motor does vibe quite a lot when you get up into those higher revs. At sort of moderate revs, it's pretty comfortable. As you get up there, it does start to buzz, and of course you're going to feel it because it's got that slender bench style, cafe racer style seat. But I think only when you're either gassing it away from the lights, or if you are doing 60 or 65 on the motorway, you're going to feel that. And I honestly don't think people are really going to do that much of it. It's only momentary if you're accelerating and then you knock into a gear that's more comfortable. If you are cruising along at 60 odd on this bike, then like I say, I think that's probably a bad decision. I don't have a great deal more to say about the motor really. A buzzy little 125 does its job. I think maybe a question that some people might have is like, what's the build quality like? It's Chinese made. This bike's like just over $2,000. I can't really speak that much on how reliable it is. I've had this for about 4 weeks and I haven't had a problem. I had the Terrain for a few weeks as well. No problems with that either, but ultimately if you want a good feel of reliability, I tend to find, as with any bike that I review, I only have them for a matter of weeks and they've all been serviced before they've come out to me, or at least checked over by a mechanic. So it's unlikely you're going to get any problems. But yeah, really, you've got to go and do your own research and have a look on some forums and that kind of thing to get a feel. The brakes are actually quite good on this bike as well. It's a 3-pot on the front, so for a bike of this weight, I would have expected a 2-pot caliper, but yeah, 3, and there's definitely plenty of stopping power. There are a couple of caveats though. One is the link brakes, which I talked about on the Sinnis terrain as well. So smaller capacity bikes like this don't have to have ABS by law, but if they don't have ABS, they have to have both brakes operable by one lever, and on this bike it's the rear brake lever, the pedal if you will. I think it's a mad system. Basically it means that if you do an emergency stop, you can't really like balance out the two brakes. If you do accidentally grab a lot of front brake on the lever on the bars here, as well as stamp on the pedal a bit, you're going to get like double the effect on the front brake, and the likelihood of it losing grip and washing out is greater, I would say personally. So especially in the wet, it feels a little bit sketchy. Not Sinnis' fault. I don't think they would have built it like this had the law not been as such, but that's just how it is, I'm afraid. You probably get used to it. I've been using more rear brake and just accepting the fact that that is the front brake as well. I don't know if you could disconnect it, but yeah, I find it a little bit annoying. The other thing is as well, there are times when the rear brake on its own is useful for a bit of stability at low speed, or I would just prefer it. I think that rule was made by someone who doesn't really ride bikes. And the other thing that's a shame is a lot of learners might be looking at this bike as like a entry-level cafe racer, younger riders, and it doesn't really teach you about the braking that you're going to get on bigger bikes. Anyway, given that, you know, Sinnis have to operate within those rules, I'd say the brakes are actually pretty good. Like, they've got power, it's just that they've been forced to kind of use a system that I don't think is particularly good. The other thing is the tyres as well. Like, these are flat tracker style tyres, almost knobbly, and they're probably not as grippy as something that's, you know, entirely road focused. You've got a smaller contact patch, so potentially that's something I'd look at swapping out. I haven't had any major problems with grip, but probably once these tyres are worn, I might go for something more road focused. A word on the suspension though. You've got these big gold upside down forks on the front, and they, well, whatever you think about how they look, because that's a little bit subjective. I just don't know if regular, smaller forks would suit this bike better from a weight distribution perspective. When I got on the bike, I felt like these big chunky forks make the whole front end a bit heavy, and it took a while to get used to the handling because the back of the bike is not that tall, not that wide, not that heavy. So it felt like a bit of a mismatch to me, although now I've got used to it, the handling feels totally natural and it actually handles quite nicely. I mean, it's very firm up front, the suspension. I don't think you need anything particularly cushy for a bike that isn't really intended for big miles, so I don't think it's a problem, and actually kind of nice sharp handling is a bit of fun on this little bike. The rear's relatively firm as well. You've got piggyback shocks. I'm going to get out of here, this is too annoying. Oh, look at that, beautiful. So yeah, generally the suspension, I'd say I'm pretty happy with it. Quite firm, but oh, look at that, rolls with the Savoy number plate. Yeah, suspension's firm, but do you need a comfortable ride on a short haul bike like this? Probably not. I think a lot of people would choose that slightly sharper handling. Only criticism is it does feel a little bit heavy at the front to me, but then again, you get used to that kind of thing quite quickly. A couple other things that I think are worth highlighting on this bike. So the ride position, clip-ons, you might expect it to be hunched and far forward and not particularly comfortable, but if you actually look at the bike from the side, the seat is accessibly low. I can flat foot it well easy. I think it's about 760 mil. The forks are actually quite tall. You know, the top of the forks is above the line of the tank, and then the clip-ons are right at the top and raised a little bit. So actually, although it's probably more aggressively set up, the ergonomics, than some of their other bikes like the Scrambler, it's not that taxing. I can do a decent 45-minute, hour-long commute, and by the end of it, I can feel it on my lower back, but it's not excruciating. A lot of that's going to depend on your height as well. I'm not massively tall, I'm about 5'9". But yeah, for taller riders, maybe the Scrambler's a better choice. Maybe I'll get to try that out at some point. It's definitely an easy bike to ride though, very lightweight, easy to flat foot, not particularly uncomfortable for a cafe style bike. So it gets a little thumbs up from me in that respect. pillion wise, you can remove the seat cover, and I think there's a pillion seat under there, but there's no bracket for the tail light, which is integrated into the seat cover, the cowl, so you would need to figure that out. I don't think it'd be very difficult to get a little bracket in there and drill it into the mudguard, but just something to consider if you do want to take a passenger, although I'm not really sure it's got enough zip for hauling 2 people around much. You might do it occasionally, but it'll be slow progress, and I don't know how quickly it'll accelerate, probably not that quickly. Equipment wise, it's pretty simple. I mean, got quite a nice little retro looking clock, but there's not a great deal of functionality in there. There's not even a clock, like a clock to tell the time. There's no revs, it's just speed and gear position. It does have a fuel gauge, which is sometimes missing on some bikes of this budget, but other than that, there's not a great deal to talk about. But what do you expect? You don't really need all the bells and whistles on something like this. I mean, the big question, as I mentioned, regarding the motor and probably for the rest of the bike, is the build quality. It's been pretty fine. I lost the bolt out of the, on the kickstand there's a kill switch, so that if the kickstand is down, the bike won't start. I think I accidentally caught that with my foot a few times, that bolt head, and then it's wound out somehow. So I've had to just position the kill switch in a way that means that it always starts, but then I don't have the safety of the, the side stand cutting the engine. So I have to be very careful to remember that, that the side stand's down, and make sure that I flip it up before I set off. But that probably, is quite easy to replace that bolt, and maybe it just needed a bit more thread lock, or maybe it was me stamping on it, because the side stand's a little bit far back, and that just takes a bit of getting used to. But like I say, general build quality, fine. I would probably do away with some of these little chrome bits. I think they cheapen the look of it a bit. So, I don't know, you can't avoid it on the top of the forks here and the steering nut. Maybe you can't really replace those. But like the chrome looking indicators, I'll probably swap them for some black ones. Try and sort of de-bling it a bit, and I think that would look better overall. People who are thinking about buying this bike obviously have the looks in mind somewhat, because you might go for just a generic 125 like Japanese bike if you don't care about having a retro style to it, something a bit more modern and plasticky. This definitely does a decent job of that cafe styling. It does have a seat cowl, which the Sinnis guy...
Very nice.
Oh, thanks mate.
Bling.
Yeah, it's a bit bling, isn't it?
Blinging, yeah. Did you just get it, or?
It's not mine, I'm just testing it, yeah. Yeah. But yeah, it comes with a headlight cowl as well, like a little mini bikini fairing type thing that the Sinnis guys removed before they dropped it off because they thought it looked better without it. I think I'd carry that on through the rest of the bike. There's some pillion grab handles, some little reflectors here. What else would I take off it? A little tail tidy would be good as well. I think there's a few ways to declutter it and make it look a bit more like a sleeker cafe racer, like we're kind of used to seeing on the sort of custom bikes on Instagram, But all in all, it's been great fun. I mean, there are quite a few bikes operating in this space. There's a few other companies doing retro 125, so I don't think there's a great deal of difference between them. You probably just go for the one that you like the best look of, or the one that you get the best deal on. There's also other 125s to consider that don't have that retro styling, or could you get some in second hand? I don't know. I think if you're looking for something that looks specifically like this and you want a new bike, then it's definitely worth a little test ride. So as I always say, don't just take my word for it, go and ride one yourself. But I hope I've given you a bit of a feel for some of the things that I've found out about the bike. I've commuted pretty much every day. The Street Twin's been in the garage, just gathering dust, because I really wanted to give it a good test. And really, it tempts me to get a smaller capacity bike, especially for winter, where I maybe want to keep the Street Twin in a bit better nick. Just being able to pin this everywhere and not worry too much if it gets a bit mucky as well, because obviously it's a cheaper bike. Yeah, I like the idea of it. It's also super economical on fuel. I've only been filling it up every couple of weeks. It's a 10 litre tank, which is pretty decent for a bike of this size. And it does me for probably fueling up half as often as my Street Twin. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this little ride around London. It's looking super festive at the moment with all the Christmas lights up. And if you've got any questions about the Sinnis Bomber, leave them in the comments below. I'll try my best to get back to you. And if you're new here, want to see more videos like this, hit subscribe and I'll see you in the next one. Connect.